weekend, and I think that he's going to be a guy that you're gonna see used in a number of different positions in a number of different ways in the fall once the Titans offense gets rolling. Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast for Monday, May the 15th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, Director of Published Content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network, and I'm joined as always by producer JT. JT, how are you? Happy Monday. How was your weekend?
It was a good weekend, but same old, same old. I'm going into the busiest work week I think I've had since the draft, which isn't long ago, but you know, work hard, play hard, because then I'm taking the weekend off because it's my birthday. So, you know, work hard, play hard.
Birthday time, family coming in. I know you've already got an itinerary. You have a lot of fun things going on that I may or may not be joining you for. I sure hope I'm going to be joining you for.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know what wasn't fun this weekend, or at least for some folks, was if you're a 76ers fan. Woof. That was the notable sports news of the weekend.
They lost to the Boston Jason Tatums, man. Like
they did. Hey, Jason Tatum remembered how to play basketball in Game 6. He forgot, but in Game 7, I guess in Game 6 he just decided to take all the points from that game and then put them all in Game 7, which that game in hindsight worked out.
Probably the only basketball game that I've watched all postseason here. And
it was a terrible game.
And I watched maybe a half. So like that's how much NBA basketball I have watched this postseason. So don't ask me anything about it.
In other sporting news this weekend, very dead weekend for sports. I happened to accidentally catch the end of the XFL championship on Saturday.
Oh, how was that? I don't know who won that.
Hilarious. The DC Defenders were 10-1, best team all year, and they lost by 2 touchdowns to a team that was 5-6. Bob Stoops' Renegades was a below 500 team and won the championship.
The team that got in over the Battlehawks, right? I remember how contentious that was.
Exactly.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was the team that got in and they went on a magical run, and I don't know what happened. I didn't watch anything but the end of the fourth quarter.
It's their one shining moment right there. Cinderella story right there to cap off.
And it was pretty funny too, because the championship not jerseys, but t-shirts they put on afterwards, the primary color of the t-shirts was the primary color of the Defenders. Like I think the league was kind of forecasting and didn't quite work out that way. But that was the most notable sports news from the weekend, which just goes to show how dead it was. We did, however, have Titans training camp rookie minicamp this weekend that I was at, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Not a whole lot to report because rookie minicamp, in terms of the year-long calendar of things that go on at the Titans facility worth reporting on, it is the least substantive. There's not a whole lot. It's very short. The practice is very abbreviated. It's in t-shirts and shorts. It's not in pads. And it's a lot of guys that are new to the team. So a lot of mistakes, a lot of patience from coaches. Like it's just a very different atmosphere than what you're going to see in August for training camp, for example. So I have some thoughts from that, mainly just getting to get my eyeballs in person on these guys, see what they're like, see what they got from just a basic athletic standpoint, build standpoint, speed, all of that. You can kind of gauge those things. And so we got a little bit on that, and then a couple of things for Titans news. And one topic I want to mention in the warm-up today that relates to the Titans schedule in 2023. And then we're going to get out of here. JT, kind of an abbreviated show today. But that's because tomorrow we've got not an abbreviated show, a very exciting one with our guy Danny Kelly, who we've been hyping up for a couple of shows in a row now. We're going to be doing a show with him on Tuesday, probably going to be live in the afternoon with him, but just depending on schedule, still working out the details with him. There's a chance that is recorded and then comes out Wednesday at the very latest, the Danny Kelly episode, recapping the draft and kind of just where the Titans are right now and other fun things that we get into. That will be at the latest on Wednesday, but look out for it on Tuesday, tomorrow, to see if it is live, and you may be able to get a question in for Danny or two, which would be super fun because he's a fantastic guy. JT, let's start with the warm-up today. So here's what I have for the warm-up. On Twitter, I put out a list of the quarterbacks that the Titans are playing this year. I went through their schedule and made a tiers list of quarterbacks that they're going to be facing this season. So we've got it here. If you're watching on YouTube with us, here is the tweet that I put out and the tiers of the quarterbacks that I came up with. And so the quarterbacks the Titans play this year, the way that I grouped them, the rookies, right? Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. The sophomores, Desmond Ridder and Kenny Pickett, kind of lumped them together both because of their age and because of the level of talent there. You don't quite know what to expect. You're certainly not super scared of either of those guys, but they could certainly be competent quarterbacks by the time the Titans face both of them in the middle of the season. The good veterans, some folks took issue with this category. Derek Carr, Tua Tagovailoa, and Geno Smith, I grouped into the good veterans portion of this. My Watson tier is Deshaun Watson, because who knows if he's going to be old Deshaun Watson or new Deshaun Watson. He might stink, or he might be elite again. We don't know. And then great to elite, the guys that you're actually really scared of, right? Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and yes, this is what we're going to talk about here in a moment, Trevor Lawrence. Those are the four, easily the best four quarterbacks the Titans are going to be facing this season. And it's really 5 games, right? Because you play Trevor Lawrence twice. Before we talk about Lawrence in a little bit of detail, JT, people had issue with me putting Derek Carr, Tua, and Geno Smith in the good veterans category. And a lot of folks wanted me to, it was such a, people, this time of year, can you kind of feel people desperate for something substantive to talk about? Because there's a lot of really pedantic and dumb arguments over things that don't matter. Like, people are antsy for actual sports. There's not a whole lot going on. And in the football world, at least, people are looking to pick fights over the dumbest possible things because they're just bored. Okay.
I agree with you.
Agree.
100%.
Okay. I'm just making sure we're on the same page there, because I mean, maybe not. Has that not been your experience? I've just been seeing a lot of folks angry for no reason on the internet about football.
I mean,
in May of all times.
Yeah, but like, I've seen it, but like, the difference is like you're actively putting it out there for them to engage in it, and I'm just like a little bystander with my popcorn watching. So I do see it. I don't engage in it because I think it's dumb.
Am I crazy, or is good synonymous with average? Like, on a scale of good, great, elite, like that, I think of good as average, because below good is bad, right? Like, what is is good not average to you? I see it as average, at least.
I think you like tiptoe the line here between like good and then you add veteran, which like in like NFL terms, like a veteran is like someone who's been around the league. So it's like a very average,
these guys have been.
Average term. But like the word veteran is like applies to
positive connotation.
even like bad quarterbacks. Like, you could call Josh Dobbs a veteran who's seasoned veteran. You could call Josh McCown, Ryan Fitzpatrick, all these, but they're not exactly good. They're just average. They can handle a game, which is why I kind of agree with you that I think these guys are in a tier above like what average would be.
Right, because these guys all fall in that quarterback 11 through 17 or 18 in the league. Like, they're in the middle of the pack. All three of these guys, if I had to describe what characterizes them in this grouping, like what they have in common, is they're quarterbacks that have proven they can win a lot of games with the right stuff around them, and they're going to lose if they don't have a lot of help. Like, that's how I see these guys. It's kind of that Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill, Derek Carr, Geno Smith, like all those guys that are like, yeah, you could even win a Super Bowl with one of these guys with the right stuff around them, but they aren't going to. You're not scared of them in particular, right? When you see them coming up on the schedule, you're not like, oh no, we're playing Derek Carr. It's like, okay, we're playing the Saints, who happen to have Derek Carr on their team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so people took a lot of issue with that, and that is dumb in my opinion. These are all three veterans that have proven they are good in the right circumstances. And while Derek Carr may not be good this year, because we don't really know what the Saints are exactly going to be, Geno Smith's situation only got better from last year, and they were a playoff team. So like, he's going to be a very good quarterback this year. I have no doubt. And Tua also, his situation, as long as his brain stays in one place in his head and doesn't bang around against his cranium all season long, and he has to miss the whole season again, he's going to be good. He has a great situation around him, minus maybe the offensive line. But I saw today that the Dolphins signed Isaiah Wynn from, a veteran tackle from New England. So they're still working to bolster that protection for him. So like, they're going to be good quarterbacks. That's dumb to argue that they're not going to be. People are just looking to pick a fight. Speaking of looking to pick a fight, and I think this is actually maybe less having to do with picking a fight for the sake of picking a fight, and much more, people truly are delusional on this front. Trevor Lawrence being in the great to elite tier pissed off a lot of people. I mean, a ton of people in a shocking turn of events. JT, Titans fans happen to not think that the ascendant team in their division, the quarterback of which, who was a generational prospect coming out of college, happens to just be an average quarterback. That's what they've convinced themselves. I saw a lot of Trevor Lawrence is maybe just above average. That was what people were saying. Like, he's average at best. It's very funny that they're like, he has to have the right coach. Excuse me? I think he just has to not have Urban Meyer, because everyone has to not have Urban Meyer because he's a horrendous NFL coach. Obviously, like, did we notice how the rest of the team around Trevor Lawrence also sucked really, really bad when Urban Meyer was the coach? And then anyone but Urban came in, and then they started to look good again. People were like, yeah, but it's Doug Peterson. Like, he's a really good coach. And I'm with you. He is a very good coach. I think he's one of the top half coaches in the league, and certainly is responsible for some of the success that they've had. But JT, I'm old enough to remember when they fired Urban, like right at the halfway point of the season, maybe just past the halfway point. And we saw a long stretch of Jaguars football in Trevor Lawrence's rookie year under, I don't even remember who the interim coach was, somebody that is no longer there. And they got significantly better just with this, I mean, like a water bottle at the head coach position, somebody that's not Urban Meyer. That's all it took. So cut this, he needs the right coach BS. That's nonsense, okay? What is also nonsense is folks convincing themselves that Trevor Lawrence had a bad year last year and using the last 2 weeks of the season to dictate that. A lot of pointing to, well, in week 18 against the Titans, he didn't look that good. They played a really conservative game plan, and when it mattered, he won the game. Number two thing that they point to is, well, in the playoff game, he threw 3 or 4 interceptions, right? He almost blew that game for them. He's also the reason they had one of the most historic comebacks in NFL playoff history, and they won the game. Now, granted, it helps you're playing with the Chargers, the biggest choking dogs in the entire league from a historical standpoint. But, it did take him playing hero ball in the second half and played really, really well and won the game. So those two things are not valid excuses in my mind. Trevor Lawrence is a guy, and in this group, I'm perfectly willing to admit that of Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Trevor Lawrence is the most projection-y to fit into this group, right? And folks also like to conflate. You think he's elite? Can we read, folks? It's great to elite. Like, these are the guys you're actually worried about. They are great quarterbacks. Some of them are elite. The only guy in here that I'd really call elite, because I think elite is thrown around way too much, is Joe Burrow. Everybody else is just a great quarterback in my mind. And with Trevor, people are like, we haven't seen him be great. You're just thinking he's going to be great. That's not true. In the last 6 or 7 games of the year last year, he was a great quarterback. And if you don't think that he was, you've not watched him play. Like, you've not watched the tape. You've not even watched the game film, I don't think, because it didn't take detailed tape study to look at some of the plays he was making multiple times a game, every single game, that were things that you're like, oh man, yeah, there's like maybe a handful plus of guys in the league that can do that and do that on a regular basis. He was doing things. I mean, his bag is so much deeper than the average quarterback. His toolkit has so many more tools. It's so much more diverse than, a Tua, for example, or a Geno Smith. Like, what he's capable of doing from an athleticism standpoint, from an arm strength standpoint, from an arm angle standpoint, from a field vision standpoint, from you dropping this ball into a hole shot 3 different times a game that is a play that you only see Aaron Rodgers make on a consistent basis in today's NFL with him and Patrick Mahomes. Like, he makes each game he played in the back half of last year, you saw 2 or 3 or 4 different plays where you're like, yeah, I can only count 3 or 4 other guys in the league that consistently do that. And Trevor was consistently doing that. So people took issue with my watch the tape rebuttal to this. But it's really as simple as, if you are scouting Trevor Lawrence last year and his ability to play quarterback based on box score. I mean, box score scouting in general is pedantic and simple-minded and dumb. And anyone who thinks otherwise is dumb. But in this case in particular, the tale of the stats simply do not accurately reflect what we saw from Trevor Lawrence in the back half of last season. So unless he has a historically unique track record here, because like historically, JT, what are we used to seeing from quarterbacks from year 1 to 2 and 2 to 3? Like, there's a significant leap in each of those years. And with Lawrence, it's kind of weird because you can't even really call his rookie year in terms of development, because under Urban, they didn't develop him really at all, and he was being put into impossible situations. So he was really just kind of treading water and fighting for survival. So he's really on like year 2.5 in my mind from a development standpoint coming into the season, unless he has a very unique in terms of the historical track record of quarterbacks of this caliber and how they develop year to year. Third year, which I don't think that he will, because history dictates he'll take a step forward at the very least be the same guy that he was. He's going to be great because he was great at the end of last year. So I don't want to hear it from folks. If you don't like that, my answer is watch the tape and you want specific examples. I'm sorry, I'm not going to hold your hand and do like a detailed tape study and walk you through for an hour all the reasons why he's good. There's plenty of people have done that exact thing on YouTube, numbers of people from last season. So just go Google it. Or like the hard-headed bozos that were commenting on this saying that I'm wrong. A lot of them were hardheads in the sense that they didn't want to go watch the tape, and they clearly, and some of them admittedly, had no interest in watching the tape. They saw the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. Yeah, man, they do. They 100% do. And that is a really stupid way to approach evaluating talent in the NFL. So that's the case there. Titans fans, take the two-tone blue glasses off and admit to yourselves that Trevor Lawrence is a great quarterback who is going to be in your division for a long time. Is he elite? No, that's a bridge too far. Could he continue to develop into an elite quarterback like a Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes level, caliber of player? Yeah, there's still that possibility. Absolutely. But as of right now, he's already a great quarterback, and you just need to get used to that. He's very, very good. And as much as you don't want to admit that he is. All right. JT, let's talk about training camp. Rookie Minicamp, which was this weekend. And we got to see all the rookies, got to speak to all of the rookies besides Jalen Duncan at the press conference afterwards. I don't really have super formal notes on this topic because of, frankly, some of the restrictions on what we can and can't report from training camp, Rookie Minicamp. They do a really strict job, the Titans do, with making sure the reporting pool knows what they can and can't talk about. Ultimately, what it is they are really trying not to have any narratives spun from this one day that we're allowed to come watch on these young guys. They want to protect them from that. And from the organization standpoint, I can understand it. From a public standpoint, from a media standpoint, it's incredibly frustrating. So there are some things I can't tell you, but there's a lot that I can. And maybe JT, you and I can just kind of discuss this because I don't have super formal notes. We can kind of just go position by position, and I can give you the thoughts on what I saw.
Yeah, so we can do that. Let's start off with probably the hottest commodity this past weekend, Will Levis, who was noted at the Rookie Minicamp as someone who definitely does not skip leg day. There were a couple videos out there. Dude,
no.
Dude looks strong in his agility drills. And there was also a clip put out by, or at least was found by Mike Herndon, that he put out with Levis making some pretty impressive throws. The Titans
social media put it out.
Yeah, some pretty impressive throws right before Rookie Minicamp. What were your thoughts on Levis?
So Levis had a very good camp from what we saw. Was smiling ear to ear for a lot of it. Seemed to be having a good time. To his credit, he does not skip leg day or any other day in the gym. This dude's a gym rat. Just look at him. You can tell, like, buddy, in the NFL, to play quarterback, you don't have to be that rocked up. Some people would maybe, like, pre-draft, we heard a lot of folks saying, like, maybe he needs to not be as big. Just from once you get certain muscle mass in your upper body in particular, like, the limitations for movement are sometimes problematic for quarterbacks. Like, if your traps are so big you can't get the ball behind your ear, maybe that's not good. But I'm not going to pretend to be a quarterback technique expert, right? I will say this, and a lot was made of this, JT. His release is lightning fast. I mean, this guy gets the ball out of his hand from identifying the target to releasing the ball. It has to be, one of the fastest releases in the league. I'm confident if he never pans out to be at any good as a quarterback at anything, I can tell you, as long as he is employed by a team in the NFL, he's going to have a top 5, top 10 release speed, because it really is. And this may be sacrilegious and folks are going to freak out, but I'm comparing this one individual element of the way that they play. it's really reminiscent of Aaron Rodgers, the way that he kind of effortlessly just flicks the ball, like the way it jumps off of his hand, and you're just like, that's special, man. I don't know how you get that much power on that ball that quickly. That's how it is with Levis, and seeing it up close. Definitely go find that video on Mike, our buddy Mike Herndon. I think it's at Mike Herndon NFL on Twitter. There's a video or two from the Titans social media where he's making plays and that ball just jumps off of his hand like lightning. It certainly was helpful, the comparison that he had to the other quarterback they had in Mo Hassan, who was a guy they signed just to be really a camp body. He played at Vanderbilt. I say played. He never actually got any snaps, I don't think. And then he was at USC for a while in college. I think it was a 5-year collegiate guy with like 200 some odd yards in total in college with 0 starts. So he truly was just, and on that tangent, by the way, I don't know if you saw this, JT, a lot of people were complaining about like, why the Titans bring in this bum? Like they couldn't find anybody better. Yeah, they could have found somebody better than him, but also let me tell you this, folks, I can't think of something more pointless to complain over than the quality of the camp arm they bring in. Like they truly just needed anybody with an arm. They could have had me in there doing this. His limitations at this camp had no impact on the quality or the pace or any of it. Like Will Levis got the vast majority of the snaps, and the snaps that Mo Hassan got, while his arm looks like a complete noodle compared to Will Levis, and it's not fair to him. Like Will Levis is going to make most guys' arms look like noodles. He was accurate enough and like did his job. He was just there helping out, and that, you know, is not something worth complaining over. And I saw a lot of people complaining over it. So relax. It's not that big a deal. They could have brought in, again, a water bottle who could throw the ball accurately, and it'd have been fine. But the other thing is on Levis. Sorry,
no,
what?
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, I agree. From watching some of the clips this past weekend, it was like night and day, and Levis looked super impressive from what I saw.
Levis made Hassan look like he was throwing a medicine ball at times. Like the heave ho required in that motion was night and day compared to Levis. And the other thing with Levis is it is striking how similar he looks to Tannehill in everything that he does. First of all, just physically, like they're both roughly 6'3", 6'4", 220, 225. So they've got very similar builds. They have the same color hair, same color eyes, I think. So they physically look a lot alike. He just looks like a younger version of Tannehill. And the way that he plays, he's got a really strong arm like Tannehill. He's a strong guy like Tannehill. He's kind of a gamer with his legs, not a shifty like Lamar style runner. You know, not somebody that's really going to be super elusive and electric in that way, but more similar to like a Josh Allen in the way that he runs, a little bit maybe faster, less powerful Josh Allen in the way that he runs. A number of times in camp, he took off and ran the ball when there wasn't anything down the field. And with the group of receivers they had at this camp, that, you know, there wasn't often a whole lot down the field. But the things that stood out with him were definitely leadership quality. He was a guy that was easily the most vocal leader there that I saw, which, you know, makes sense and clearly comes naturally to him. His press conference went well. I don't have a ton of notes on any of the press conferences. There's a lot of videos from it on my Twitter. If you want to go find it at Easton Freeze on Twitter, you can find all those videos from Saturday. But it was, what do you ask these guys this time of year? It was a lot of, how's your first few days with the Titans been? Good, great, enjoying it. You know, who are you rooming with at the hotel? Are you enjoying getting to meet, you know, your fellow teammates? How are your relationship with the coaches? A lot of repetitive questions. And then questions you'd expect, like Peter Skoronski, what positions have they been playing you at? You know, would you prefer to play guard? Does it bother you, the arm length discussion? Tyjae Spears, let's talk about your knee. You know, like it's the stuff you'd expect to hear. So not going to go into a ton of detail on those things, but the overall vibe was this guy's fit. This guy's serious. One anecdote from the press conferences was Colton Dowell, the Titans' 7th round wide receiver. He was talking about how him and Levis, somebody asked if he and Levis had, you know, started to form a relationship at all. And he was talking about how he and Levis were actually rooming at the hotel that they were keeping all the rookies in. And Colton said he was afraid to touch the remote. It has been so far afraid to touch the remote in their hotel room because Levis was in there first when Colton showed up. And since the moment they both got into that room, Levis hasn't touched the remote and has been on his team iPad just studying the entire time. And so he's like, I'm not going to be the first guy that turns on the TV. So certainly Levis is a guy that seems like he's making a good impression on people, doing all the right things. And he looked good in the limited passing that they allowed him to do at the session that the media were at, he looked good despite not having a ton of very awesome targets at his disposal.
Yeah, let's move on to Peter Skoronski, the Titans' first overall pick in this past NFL draft. There was a couple of clips that came out of Peter Skoronski just absolutely bulldozing some guys over in a couple drills. He was looking like a bull out there. Like, he was looking tough. He
like
was
a
looking fast.
Bulldozer, perhaps. Yeah.
He was looking very good. What were your thoughts on him?
Yeah, and the offensive linemen are the hardest to really get anything from this because, you're not in pads. They're fighting against dudes holding the bags or, tackling dummies or sleds. And it's a lot of light work, and they have them off in the corner because it's what are you really doing here? But I will say this with Skoronski. It is always, and I've been doing this long enough, not super long, but long enough now to see a couple examples of this, and it is not yet worn off, just the effect. And JT, you've seen this too at the combine. Like, all of these guys that you see at the combine or at these training camps or at these mini camps, they're all elite athletes, top 1% athletes in the world. Like, they could dust all of us. They're all superstar fit dudes. And yet the difference between the dudes that are going to be fighting for a roster spot and the dudes who are first round caliber blue chip talent like Will Levis and in this instance Peter Skoronski is so aggressively apparent to, I think, even an untrained eye. You could bring your grandmother who doesn't know the first thing about football, she doesn't even know who Tom Brady is, into the camp and be like, pick out the person that you think in this group is the most talented. And within 10 seconds, they're like, it's obviously that guy, the Northwestern kid. He's got Skoronski on his helmet. This dude is so different from it was him and Jalen Duncan and a bunch of, scrubs, really, to be honest. So it is going to be a stark comparison between them all. But his raw power that he possesses, those videos aren't cherry picked. Like, that was kind of anything you saw from him there. Every single rep was him just being this raw, powerful bulldozer that you described. And despite not being like the biggest dude there, like Jalen Duncan is a bigger dude than Skoronski is, by a small noticeable amount. And even then it's like Skoronski's easily the strongest dude in this group. He's easily got the best technique in this group. He's easily the most polished player in this group. Like, you can just tell immediately, just eye test that, oh, that's an NFL player. And Skoronski that's an NFL player.
Tyjae Spears was someone who was talked about a lot this past weekend, as he was doing a lot of running out of the backfield, but also, and a lot of people had a problem with this, he was lining up in the slot, and people were kind of going crazy about that.
Did they have a problem with it, or were they just surprised by it? Because I didn't catch on that, but maybe they were.
See, I just had a lot of people being like, "Oh, did we draft Tyjae Spears just to be a wide receiver? Why did we even draft him in the first place?" Things like that.
Well, first of all, Titans fans should be excited by that, right? Aren't they the ones that want receivers and not running backs? That should be a positive thing. No?
That is true. Yeah, I guess so. But what were your thoughts on Tyjae and how he looked both in the running portions of his practice and also how he looked out of the slot and receiving?
Looked pretty good for a guy with one ACL. I'll tell you what, I've never seen a ACL-less person as athletic as Tyjae Spears. And to get that out of the way, he was asked a number of times by some particularly pesky members of the media pool who are just doing their job, but they really were pressing the question about the knee. I think some folks that maybe weren't as well read on what the situation is and were continuing to try to get the answer from the source. There's answers on this out there, guys. Like, there was some, I forget who, but they were like, do you not have an ACL? Guys, we know he doesn't have an ACL. Like, we've known this for weeks now, right? It's not a question like it's reported he doesn't have an ACL. No, he does not have one of the ACLs, but he's an ACL deficient person is the technical jargon for it. And because of the combination of his lack of ACL and I think the early onset bone spur arthritis situation in his knees, it's like two wrongs make a right, and they stabilize each other in a funky way. And the doctors have cleared him. And so he and the doctors and the team are all like, hey, man, his response to these questions were, I'm healthy. I'm excited to be here. I'm healthy. I'm excited to be here. I'm healthy. I'm healthy. I'm healthy. Which I get it. Fair for him. I'm sure. And another person asked, is it annoying how often you get this question about the ACL? And he acknowledged, like, of course, it's always going to be a question that follows him. It's an oddity. It's something that concerns people. I get it. But he said there's naturally some frustration there. And can you really blame him? Right. I mean, it is something that would get really old really fast, especially when we all just spent 2 hours in the Titans bubble at the facility watching him be easily one of at least the most explosive physical athletes out there on the field. So clearly, even if he doesn't have an ACL, it's not really hindering him right now. And we saw him do a lot of really impressive things out there. JT, he did play a lot in the slot and we didn't see it, it was a short practice, so very small sample size, but they were wearing him out at the slot for a while. And he, unlike a lot of running backs, what makes him a threat and a true third down back is that ability he's not a body catcher, right? You can lead him with the ball and he can hand catch a ball or arm catch a ball, full extension. He's got really nice hands. I will say this, to be not just all rose colored glasses on this guy. His hands are really, really nice. And you probably know this from when we were watching tape on him a couple weeks ago. He's got really, really nice hands until he doesn't, if that makes sense. So it's kind of all or nothing. He drops a handful of balls. You're like, ooh, I'm pretty sure he can catch that. He should catch that. It was right between the numbers. And then he'll make a snag where it's like, wow, he got up for that, right on the fingertips, one-handed grab. And you're like, where was that? So maybe that's just an element of, new to the NFL, first mini camp, a lot going through your mind. I don't know if it was maybe an unfair sample size. Maybe he would tell you, yeah, today wasn't my best day. I had more drops than I typically have. But when he's on, he's on. And if the Titans are able to utilize him in the fall in a way that they can get the ball in his hand at the second level, in the passing game, oh boy, he's going to be a handful and a half for defenses to try to bring down. Definitely going to be a yards after the catch guy, despite being a little bit on the smaller side. And he's not going to be an easy tackle either by any means, even if you can get your hands on him in the first place, because he's a really, really elusive runner. I'm hardcore in on this take that, like, dude, Tyjae Spears is the built in a lab perfect complement for Derrick Henry. So that's what he looked like this weekend, and I think that he's going to be a guy that you're gonna see used in a number of different positions in a number of different ways in the fall once the Titans offense gets rolling.
Let's move on to a guy that both of us have been a little bit down on, which is the tight end, Josh Whyle, out of the University of Cincinnati. Didn't see too much from him, although he did end off practice with a pretty impressive catch from Will Levis. What did you see from him? And have you kind of changed your tune on Josh Whyle?
So I've not changed my tune as much as I've more embraced the other side of the coin, because to be completely fair, JT, the reason why we didn't like him as a fit for the Titans was because of the type of role he'd be playing, not the quality of player, right? When we were objective, non-Titans observers of him in the draft process, like, this guy could be a nice find as a tight end option in the later rounds, but we see him as more of a does one or the other tight end, and not a guy that you can count on in the passing and blocking games because of his size and because of his power. He's easily the tallest guy at camp, I think. Maybe some of the linemen were as tall as he is, but he's like 6'6", 6'7", tall drink of water, Josh Whyle. And for that size, we have been saying that the Titans are probably going to want to put some weight on him. I still think that they're going to at least try. But I will say, for a guy that's 6'6", 6'7", he's not a string bean out there. Like, and especially when he came to the podium, took the helmet off, and you're like, yeah, this guy's got some bulk to him. I think he's in the 250 range at 6'7", which you'd think is kind of stretched out. It's not really on him. He wears the weight well, and maybe it's more in his torso, and his legs are a little bit chicken leggy a little bit, if anything, but he doesn't look like he's an undersized tight end. Now, at that height, and unless you're 280 and bordering on like, oh, is that guy actually a lineman? You're always going to have questions about, like, can you get your pad level low enough? Can you get the leverage necessary, even if your mass is big enough to not be just ragdolled around and you have your opponent dictate what you do because you're so much smaller than them? Even if you're big enough, can you get low enough to win the leverage battle? And with him, he addressed it in the press conference and said, yeah, that's always going to be a question. That's something that I'm working on. That, this program, I don't know if y'all have heard, very big on versatility. Yeah, Josh, we've heard. already really in his ear big time on making sure that he can be well-rounded in every element of the game, which you would expect them to be. But I am curious to see how they use him. And I still am down on the fact that I don't think that he's going to be, at least anytime soon, a guy that you can count on as a best case tight end 2. Now they're going to utilize him as a tight end 2 because he's all they've got, right? Like it's not going to be Trayvon Wesco as the tight end 2 out there running routes. He's going to be the glorified lineman. So he and Chig, Josh Wiley and Chig, are going to be the 2 guys in the receiving game. I just don't know if, Chig is like 235, 240, something like that. And yet I still kind of think the team may use him as a blocker just as much as Josh Wiley out of the gate, because I'm not sure if they're going to trust him at that height, at that size. He's got the physicality for it. And as a receiver, I'll say this, his body control at that size, his balance, he made a couple of catches that I don't think I saw videos of online during the non-photo portion of the session. We were like, oh, wow. Like that was, it was behind him over his trailing shoulder. He rotates around, gets his hands extended, hand catches the ball, and then rotates back around in stride. And you're like, that's going to play in the NFL, man. That's going to work. So if he can be that guy and be the 3rd and 2 guy that you have in there, that like maybe a blocker, Derrick Henry may just be going up the gut here, but we may be dumping that off to him, a 5-yard out, 5-yard flat shot like that. That could be what he is. And based on what I saw, again, a very limited sample size on Saturday, I'm more bullish on his ability to be an instant impact in the passing game than I was JT. But for the same reason, this whole time we've been not crazy about him as a fit for the Titans. I don't have much faith that he's going to be an element in the blocking game.
One more guy that we'll talk about here, and it's the guy that we've had to get familiar with in a hurry, Colton Dowell, someone who at the time of being drafted, we did not know, but we've come to know very, very quickly. He's a guy that we still really don't know what he projects to be with the Titans, whether he's a late round flyer that might just be a camp body, or he might develop into something that's a little bit more for this team, maybe a wide receiver 3 or 4 this first season. What were your thoughts on him, and how do you think he's going to fare come training camp?
So he had kind of an up and down day. But to be fair, most of the guys had an up and down day because, again, it's the rookie mini camp. There's a lot. Vrabel said in his presser that the first day they all met, he saw a lot of eyes that were like deer in the headlights about to take on the world. Like you could just see the fear, the anxiety. And he said, I had to tell all the guys, like, hey, let's all take a deep breath. Let's all relax for a second. Okay. And then, a lot of get to know yous. Like, let's get to know the guys in your position group. There's kind of a, not babying these guys, but we asked Vrabel about, are you the same guy with these rookies at this mini camp as you are with the rest of the team? And he's like, definitely not. And I've had to grow that way. He was talking about how early on he would treat them all the same. And he'd get a lot of guys. He'd accidentally break some spirits early on. And he's like, I've softened a little bit. My patience has gotten a little, in my older age, my patience has grown. And so I'm more patient with these guys. And, I tell them, we're gonna drop snaps. We're gonna have a fumble. We're gonna have a dropped catch that's right in your hands. A lineman's gonna run left when he's supposed to run right and run right into his teammate. It's gonna happen. We're gonna make a ton of mistakes because these guys are new and they're young and they're all in their head. He had to yell, not to get on the Titans' bad side here and give away too much from the closed practice, but he had to get on to a couple of guys, yell at them for thinking too much during the practice. And can you blame these guys? Of course, they're a little bit of a head case in their first or second NFL practice, but that was kind of reflected in the way that a lot of these guys played, including Colton Dowell, who had some really nice moments and had some moments where you're like, that's a guy that's going to need some development. There's a reason why he was a 7th round guy that wasn't on a lot of people's radars to even be drafted in the first place. He's got the tools. He looks the part, right? In the receiver group where it was Colton Dowell and Copeland from Maryland, and then a bunch of which, by the way, timeout. Small side note. Do you remember us talking about Kyrus Jackson out of Georgia on Friday's show, wondering why he wasn't on the UDFA list? Don't have a resolution as to why he wasn't, but I will say he was there. And he was in a jersey and he wasn't doing anything. He also was one of the, I don't know if you saw this, the Titans social media team on Friday after our show, I think, or right around our show time, posted a 4-picture collage of the parking garage where the rookies were showing up, having them walk in. And it was Peter Skoronski and Will Levis and Tyjae Spears. And then Kyrus Jackson was the fourth photo. And that was right around the same time they sent out the email to the media saying, these are the guys we signed, not including Kyrus Jackson out of Georgia. It's almost certainly he failed a physical, or they're still trying to work out some things. Vrabel was asked about it, and he said, we're trying to work things out. We're wanting to get him on the squad. As of right now, he's not. But he was there. So it was kind of strange to see him there despite not being signed yet. And for, injury liability reasons, he's not, being paid. So he wasn't going to practice, but he was there. Okay, now back to Colton Dowell. In that wide receiver room, it was him and kind of a bunch of lawn chairs and deck furniture. So that's why you didn't see a whole lot of deep shots down the field in the passing. It helps to have some receivers with some actual juice at these practices. And you're like, oh, we need a little Traylon Burks and Kyle Phillips here. You would have loved an NWI at this practice. Like that is frankly, you would have loved a Mason Kinsey at this practice, because it was truly that devoid of juice at the wide receiver position. You needed somebody that actually had some burst, had some savvy, maybe a little veteran savvy to him. Dowell was the one that flashed the most to me. His footwork, they do that ladder drill where it's the fast step in, out, in, out, in, out. And the Titans have the helmet on the stick. They like to ingrain in these guys, indoctrinate the stiff arm early. We like to start them young with the Titans. Is what I'd imagine their motto is. And in that drill, his footwork was kind of, and to be fair, a lot of these other receivers were smaller guys, and you expect them at their size to be able to chop a little bit faster, be a little bit more aggressive with that footwork. His was kind of lacking. And he got tripped up in a ladder at one point. People were wondering why in the press conference he was talking about his mind going a little bit faster than his body. There was one moment that most of us caught in the ladder drill where his feet got tangled in it and he took a tumble. And then he got barked at by Vrabel to get his butt up and kept going, and then rebounded. And Vrabel said, you just got to tell these guys not to be too in their heads, and you got to encourage them to keep going. And that's what he did. He kept going. And in the 7-on-7 team periods, in the full 11-on-11 team periods, he had a couple of really nice catches, had a really, really decent day. He was really great at the podium. I'll say from a character standpoint, this is a guy that I have no questions as to why they fell in love with this guy in the pre-draft process, why he was on their draft board. A++ character, A++ personality, clearly a great teammate, clearly a great guy to have in your locker room, clearly a guy that is not super cocky and is definitely interested in learning and developing. And that's where he's at. I think right now where I'm at on Colton Dowell is Titans fans need to still pump the brakes and realize this is a guy that's going to be fighting for a roster spot, right? He's going to be fighting with the Mason Kinseys and the Jacob Copelands and the Reggie Robersons at the back end of the maybe even the Racing McMaths of the wide receiver roster, and looking for a spot on the roster in training camp in July and August. But depending on how he does at that training camp, it would not shock me at all for him to make the roster. And it would not shock me at all for him in his first year to really be developmental, but they may have a play or two for him throughout the season where you're like, oh baby, there it is. This guy can separate like none other. His separation ability, his speed, top end speed, like he can be that bit. And he's a big fella, right? He's what, like 6'3", 6'4", 220. He's a big bodied receiver. So he can get down there and get open. And at the catch point, he's got really nice hands. His ball tracking is elite. I saw our guy, James Foster, talking about that on Twitter today. His ball tracking, based on the tape, really, really, really nice, especially for a 7th round guy. So big project. Had some up and down moments, as you'd expect from a rookie who's more of a project. But there's some flashes with Dowell, and I wouldn't write him off in your mind. I think, as is often the case on this show, I'm preaching the boring take that nobody on the internet likes to take. Very measured. Very measured. You can be mildly excited at the possibility, but understanding of the fact that he's still a guy that's going to fight for a roster spot. Okay, that's it. That's all the guys from camp, and there's not really much else to talk about on that front, JT. A couple of things on the Titans news front, and then we want to get out of here.
Yeah, sure. Let's jump right into it, I guess.
All right. Titans news with producer JT.
Yeah, let's jump into a topic that we talked about on our show on Friday regarding the schedule, and that has to do with the Titans rest differential. We were talking about how they have a plus 11-day rest differential for the upcoming season, and we're wondering where would that place them with the rest of the teams this season. Well,
I thought it'd be the best in the entire league. Yeah.
Turns out it is not. So the Titans are going to have the fourth best rest differential this season, right behind the Bears, Jets, and Commanders. And then they are tied with the Browns for the fourth best rest differential. And as it goes in terms of the league and just the history of the league, it's the 14th best rest differential since 2002. So the Titans got extremely lucky this year.
The only reason they didn't have the best in the league this season is because this season might have the most uneven rest differential just across the board. When you have 5 teams in the top 15 largest rest differentials in the league since the turn of the century, that's a lot of really unbalanced schedules. And the Bears are going to have almost 2 weeks more rest than their opponents this year, which is insane. And, good for the Bears, I guess. Good for Justin Fields. We'll see what they can actually make of it. But the fact that so many teams, for 5 of these teams to be in the top 15 ever, and for 5 teams to have double-digit positive rest differentials, it must mean, I have not seen a graph yet on the other side, there's got to be some teams this year that have just got absolutely bent over by the league in terms of rest differential. Like there must be some teams that got the short end of the stick ever. And I'm curious to see who is absolutely screwed over by that rest differential, because if there's so many at the top, there's got to be a handful at the bottom. But the Titans, I mean, for them to have not just the best they've ever had, or maybe the best they've ever had, based on what I've seen, they've got one of the best that anyone has ever had. And that is a massive plus for a team that in the past 2 seasons at least have had really bad negative rest differentials. So that's very good news for a Titans team that is trying to not go with a three-peat of all-time bad injury, down bad situations by week 3, which, injury luck. If it happens a third time, we'll have to reconsider the term injury luck, I think, because the Titans may just have injury systemic issues that we have to address that people haven't really put a finger on yet. I'm inclined to say, based on this rest differential and the fact that they got a lot younger, they're going to not be that beat up team of the last 2 years that you saw. And it's going to look like a much more median NFL team in terms of injury luck. Here's to fingers crossed on that one, because I'm sick and tired of talking about these injuries, man.
One more thing before we get out of here is a new signing. The Teron Davenport reported that the Titans have signed Northern Arizona cornerback L.J. Davis after his tryout at Rookie Minicamp. So they add a little bit of depth here to the cornerback room, which, as we've always said on the show, you can always use another cornerback.
This is true. You absolutely can never have too many cornerbacks. I will say it's funny, JT, my only thought on this is at the Rookie Minicamp, the entire media gaggle spent the entire day on the offensive side of the field, just because the Titans drafted all offense, and like every defensive guy there was a UDFA or somebody they brought in off the street or a tryout. So as far as I'm aware, nobody paid attention to the poor defenders. They had a private practice all by themselves in their end of the field. But it sounds like while they were practicing over there, one of the coaches was enamored by it. I'll buy you a drink next time we're out if you can tell me who the mascot for Northern Arizona. Who are the Northern Arizona Bobcats?
No idea.
Cougars?
Let me look it up here.
Saguaro Cactuses? I don't know who the Northern Arizona mascot is, but
you're never gonna believe this.
Show where
the mascot, I think so. They're called the Lumberjacks, and their mascot is Louis the Lumberjack. Yes, Northern Arizona University.
No, it's not. You're making that up.
I'm not making it up.
Louis the Lumberjack in Northern Arizona. Are there forests in Northern Arizona I'm not familiar with? There must be.
I don't know.
Mostly desert. Clearly not.
So there you go.
Louis Lumberjack. That's my new favorite.
The show on Louis
my new favorite mid-major.
Here.
Louis the Lumberjack. Yep. All right. So that's it for today. Just had to get those thoughts out of the way and clear the palate from the weekend, because JT, people should be looking forward to, if you're listening to this on Monday when the show comes out, tomorrow we have got our interview with our guy, Danny Kelly from The Ringer, put together one of the most important, top 5 national draft guides every year. Very big deal. He's on the NFL Ringer fantasy football show, on the Ringer's NFL draft show during the draft season. Does a ton of awesome work, and we love the work that he does, the insight that he brings. We met him in Indianapolis, and he was the nicest guy ever. So super, super excited to get to chat with him tomorrow. Look out for a live stream with him on Tuesday. And if you don't see one of those, then expect that episode in your inbox, wherever you get this show, on Wednesday morning, first thing. So that's going to be a big one, and we're super, super excited about that. Until then, JT, this has been the Hot Read Podcast. For producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. We'll talk to you in a day or two. Have a great start to your week.